This is the Hardy Sovereign, and it's the latest in a very long line of classic fly reels made by perhaps the most famous brand of fly reels ever, Hardy. If you're a fan of fly reels, or if you've been fishing long enough, chances are you've heard of Hardy. They've been making reels since 1873. That makes them one of the oldest and most popular fly reel makers of all time. And this reel here is the latest and greatest in their classic collection. That means it's made in England and it's made to more traditional specifications. The Sovereign here, unlike the Perfect, also has a drag, so you're gonna get the classic looks combined with some of the functionality of having a drag, which is great if you're fishing for larger species like Atlantic salmon or steelhead, or pretty much anything that you want to stop without banging your thumbs. But before I dive into the specs of this reel, let's talk about how it looks, because let's face it, chances are if you're buying a Sovereign, that's going to be the main reason why. And obviously, like all of the Hardy classic reels, this reel looks awesome. It's also got the royal warrant. I don't know if King Charles has bought one since he's become king, but you can bet when he buys his fly reel, it's gonna be a Hardy and it's gonna be a made in England one. It's well machined and has a great feel. And the Sovereign comes in two colors, so if you're not a fan of the shinier silver, you've got a black option as well to match your rod. But now let's jump into the drag, which, as I mentioned, it has one, which is probably the most significant feature, as most classic Hardys do not. Obviously the Perfect is going to be a click pawl, and that's probably the most famous classic Hardy of them all. Here you'll be able to adjust it with a hard stop on either end at about 1.4 turns. If you turn it all the way down on this 5-weight, you're going to get a reasonable amount of stopping power. I'd put it in the 3 to 5 pound category, which is way more than you're going to need for a trout on your bamboo fly rod. But it is a stickier drag. As I turn it, I definitely do realize that it's not going to be the world's smoothest, most modern drag system. But that's not what these reels are about. As you'd probably expect, this is not a sealed drag, so if you do happen to wander into salt water with it, you're going to want to make sure you rinse it really, really thoroughly. All in all, when I think about the drag on this Hardy, it's really that it's got one, and it's got one that works and actually has a reasonable amount of stopping power, and that's really all there is to say about it. So let's move on to the spool. Of course, you'll notice this has a standard traditional arbor, and that means it is not going to pick up line very well at all. In fact, it picks up line at a rate of about 3.8 inches per turn, and it's going to take about 300 turns of this little reel to get your 100-foot fly line. As we look at the dimensions on this spool, we've got a 2.85 max diameter, a really actually pretty nice and narrow 0.85 width, and again, that traditional arbor of 0.6 inches. And while I've already talked about the retrieval rate, this 5.6 model does hold a fair amount of backing, so you can fit 100, maybe even as much as 120 yards with your weight forward 5-weight line, which is pretty decent and honestly to be expected given the small size of that arbor. And overall, as you look at this spool, it is a fairly small reel, and it's got the performance that matches a reel that's fairly small in size. Up next is going to be weight, and this reel comes in at just a hair over 5 ounces, which is actually surprisingly light. Some classic Hardy reels are very heavyweight, and this one is not. Frankly, there are modern reels that weigh more than this Hardy Sovereign. And that's pretty cool, because if you wanted to put this reel on a modern graphite rod, you can do it and really not be giving up much in terms of weight. You're definitely not going to have a reel that's going to throw that rod way out of balance. Up next is sound, and let's take a listen. As you can tell, this is not a Hardy Perfect. It definitely does not sound as good as that reel, but while the incoming retrieve is fairly muted, the outgoing is pretty good. That's definitely going to be another big benefit to this Sovereign, is how good it sounds if you find a fish to take some of that drag. There's just not a lot of reels today that can produce that great overall sound, but this is one of them. And last but not least is going to be the Ergonomics. and it's a little bit of a mixed bag on the Sovereign. But again, this is a classic reel, and so they're not really built to be the most ergonomically efficient reels. The handle is definitely small. It definitely works, but it's just way smaller than what I'd prefer. The drag knob, on the other hand, it's not bad. Sure, it's not protruding out as much as I'd like, but on a reel like this 5-weight, you're probably not going to be messing with it all that much, and that makes it okay. And again, this reel is more about the look than the actual performance, so having ergonomics that are not up to 2024 standards is okay in my book. The spool is easy to remove, so you can pull that off with no problems at all. And that reveals a full cage, or mostly a full cage. You'll actually notice how they've got some missing portions on the cage where it doesn't really matter. But whether you're right or left-hand retrieve, you're gonna have a portion of this cage that's fully enclosed, so if you wanted to use it on your spay rod with that thin mono running line, no problems. And you're gonna get this package in the 5-weight size for $595, which is sort of the upper middle of the road for made in England Hardy reels. Ultimately, this is a reel that's designed to appeal to a very specific buyer, but I do think that this one in particular, because of that drag, actually has a much wider use. So if you're looking for a reel that looks like a classic, feels like a classic, but offers you some modern performance, look no further than the Hardy Sovereign. On the other hand, if you're looking for fast retrieve or high performance drags, this is probably not the reel for you. Let us know what you think about this reel and what your favorite classic Hardy is by leaving us a comment in the box below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we've got a lot of reel reviews coming right up. If you've got questions about this Hardy, give us a call at 888-413-5211 or email us 24/7 at support@tridentflyfishing.com. I'm Ben. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.